I'd like to call the Budget Committee to order. And the first order of business is approval of the minutes from June 25th, 2019 committee meeting. Moved by Supervisor Wild, seconded by Supervisor Beatty. Any additions, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, vote. Alrighty, the action part of our agenda is, as I've alluded to a few times over the past couple of months, before you have my proposal on establishing reserves and funding for funding to replenish the reserves. It's pretty straightforward. I can go over them quickly if you'd like.
Please.
Yes.
Please do.
Okay. SUNY Adirondack, operating and capital improvements. Funding within the 2020 budget, $150,000. Funding from the general fund balance, $100,000, for a total of $250,000. And this is an effort to raise the sponsors' percent of contribution from 11%. Hopefully we'll get to 15% per year. Any money that we spend on capital improvements are matched dollar for dollar by New York State. And this is all contingent upon negotiation with Washington County and to change the formula on how the college is sponsored. And that could be a change in full-time equivalents or assessments or a combination. That's yet to be determined. The second one is county buildings. And there is a reserve fund currently for that. It's A871. I propose to put $25,000 in next year's budget, the 2020 budget, and appropriate $100,000 from the general fund balance to capitalize the reserve. This is repair and maintenance needs, and also any possible capital costs.
What was it this year?
Currently, I think it's like $282.
Exactly. And 9 cents.
Right.
And my idea of a subcategory to that is A871.1, and that would be for countryside rehabilitation. I would budget $25,000 again to help fund this reserve in the 2020 budget, and appropriate $200,000 from the general fund balance to get the rehabilitation underway. The interior needs renovations to make it more appealing, to maximize our resident count. The third one is capital projects assessments. I propose to put $100,000 in the 2020 budget and appropriate $50,000 from the general fund balance. And as you know, everybody's put in their ideas of projects that they feel they need to have done, and a lot of it is infrastructure. And also, if you have the engineering and the assessment of the project, it works a lot better applying for grants. And some of this money could also be match dollars. The fourth one is the election equipment. There's already a reserve for that, A898. That's for new voting machines. Currently has $84,428 in it. I propose that we appropriate $100,000 from general fund balance to add to that. And in order to fund it ongoing is to fund with any unused money from the Board of Elections budget.
Frank, can you remind me what the new voting machines are supposed to cost us?
The one estimate that I recall is between $400,000 and $500,000.
Thank you.
but I'm not sure that those machines were certified by the state.
Frank, on that, to piggyback on that, and that's, each county, of and by themselves, pays 100% for their own voting machines?
I believe so.
Is that true? Yeah, okay.
I think back when they did the HAVA, back, what, 6-8 years ago, I think there was some help from either the state or the federal government, but I don't think that's the case now.
Thank you.
The fifth one is retirement payouts, sick time, vacations, and other. I propose that we put $15,000 in the 2020 budget and appropriate $50,000 from the fund balance to capitalize the fund. And the last one that I have is uninsured losses for property and casualty insurance, and this is mainly for the deductibles. Propose that we again budget $15,000 in the 2020 budget and appropriate $50,000 from general fund balance to get that started. So the totals at the bottom would be $330,000 in the 2020 budget and $650,000 from the fund balance. Yes.
So, Frank, if one were to characterize and describe the changes that are being made here, would you say that this is a more astute, conservative way of going into the future in terms of dealing with the fundamental issues raised here? How would you, and the
I think so.
rationale behind it?
I think most of it is pretty conservative. It's none of it is definitely going to take care of the problems, except for maybe the last two. I think it needs to be built upon. I don't, 1 year is not going to solve these issues, but I think it's a start. So that's how I say it. Yes, Supervisor Weil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It looks like we're taking $1 million between the budget and the fund balance to fund these reserves. What is it doing to our overall fund balance?
Currently, by my calculations, and they are my calculations, I calculate the fund balance to be $19,959,309. So if we were to do all this, it would lower the fund balance to $19,309,373. Yes, Supervisor Beatty.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman. So at the around 19 million, what percent of reserves is that? I know the state wants us at this 16.67%, which I think is ludicrous, seeing that the school boards are already required to have a maximum of 4%. So I've never been able to figure out the huge disconnect between...
That was the internal auditors, right?
Yeah, but the state...
The state also.
Yeah, the state, right? Yeah, the state had recommended. So what would that put us at 19 million? What?
14.4% right now.
14.4? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's
But
how...
that's the 19.9. We're at 14.4.
14.4 at 19,400,000, right?
Well, that's at the 19.9. 19.9 is 14.4.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So that's a healthy fund balance, though.
The percentage you gotta look at, what they're saying is that we should have enough money on hand to take care of 2 months worth of operating, okay? And for us, that's the 16.7%.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where it isn't they're saying we need 16.7%. They're looking at 2 months of operating expenses and saying that's 16.9% of your total budget.
Right. Which is just, it's not a law, it's just a recommendation or...
Right, it's a very strong recommendation.
Unless I messed up the calculation, going with this 650 would bring us to 14% even.
Yes, Mr. Weil.
Mr. Chairman, thanks again. A question about the level of reserves that we think we should have. In 2008 and 2009, there was a significant downturn in the economy. Remind me, if you can, what happened to the county budget then, and how prepared will we be with this 14% to be able to survive something like that?
Well, the sales tax dropped. Our health insurance costs were increasing by a couple of million a year at that time. Basically, it was the sales tax, so we had to start cutting positions and cutting wherever we could.
What was the drop in the sales tax? Do you recall what the number was?
Well, it was over budgeted by $500,000 one year. I was the budget officer.
Just
so-
a $500,000?
Yeah, well, that's the over budget, but then you've got to parlay that on what you figured. It really, a lot of the revenues were over budgeted when I took office. And another big one was the jail. When we came in '06, the jail revenues were budgeted high. Most of the problems we faced, I think we had, what, $3 million, Rob? I think we ended up with $3 million in my first year there, scratching our heads, so we had to make some cuts. And we had to wait for it to recover,
So what did we have in the fund balance at that time?
It was $3 million.
$3 million.
That's what in '05, it was at about 24, 25 million.
Right, and then an election year, they
By the
burned
time
it down.
Kaiser Garrity took over, it was about 3 million, okay?
We built it
That
back
was-
up.
That was because of the two things: one, the economy, and two, the board previous to that used, and I'm not gonna say they threw the money away, they used it on a lot of projects and so forth, and spent that down, and then the downturn in the economy kind of caught the county short, which is why I keep saying, we gotta keep that fund balance as high as we possibly can. We're at right around 20 million, I feel comfortable with that figure. I think we're gonna, as long as we don't spend a lot, okay, if we keep that. And I still, and I want to applaud the budget officer for doing the reserves. This is something that I've been a proponent of for a long time. This is a smart move, this is the way to go for the future. No, it's not going to cover all the costs now, but it's going to soften the blow down the road.
Supervisor Dickens.
I have two questions for you. Well, one question and a comment. Do you know what our resident count is at the facility? Are we,
I believe it's around 32 or 33.
How many
I
can
think
we take?
The last I heard. And we can hold 48.
Did a great job. I think this is really a step forward and something we definitely need to do, and I'm just glad to see that we finally stepped up and started it. And I look forward to
Thanks.
improving it.
Yes, Mr. Treasurer.
Nobody else has a question. Frank, I just have a couple of concerns about the sponsor's percentage contribution and the engineering line. I'm not totally sure that that's an appropriate way, I'm not sure what I want to use here for the word, but I don't think that that's what a reserve can be set up for.
Okay.
I think we need to look into that a little bit more. I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying the way we've got it set up, I'm not sure that that's an appropriate type of a reserve account to be setting up.
Okay.
Rob and I are going to work on that a little bit, and we'll get back to you with that.
One thing we might look at, I read somewhere recently, maybe in the Post-Star, Queensbury did a capital reserve fund. Maybe we could see what they did.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to doing this. I just want to make sure that we do it correctly.
Yeah, me too.
So that it's done. the way it should be done, that's all.
Yes, Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank you. This really, as always, I think you do a superb job, and I hope you will continue to be the chairman and do this great work. But also, I wonder, back in '08, did the county, I imagine, had to borrow at times since we were down to $3 million?
Yes.
And, so that's, one of the reasons why we should keep that reserve at a comfortable balance, and I can see why the state does it. I just want to thank you again.
And that's one of the reasons that triggered the resolutions that set the minimum, the dollar amount that we should have on hand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I'm glad to see the City Adirondack capital and operating budget reserve fund that's really going to boost City Adirondack. So I hope we can also come up with that arrangement with Washington County for the partnership there. The other thing is with the capital project, I do think that if the treasurer needs to look at that more, we should build upon that. There are hundreds of millions of dollars in projects out there, and it's going to take a lot of planning, and I think that while $150,000 is a good start, we might want to consider putting more money in there for all of the building infrastructure projects, the transportation projects, all of our natural resource protection projects. That's going to cost a lot of money to do the planning, to do it right, and to make those projects come to fruition. So I applaud you for putting that in there, and I'd ask that the committee consider putting even more in there for planning purposes, if that's an appropriate purpose.
Any other, yes?
I just
Mr.
got a
Simpson.
question about how it's going. I think it was a great plan, but just thinking about, I've mentioned before about the need to think about future buildings down for the government, which, so the bond payment would theoretically come out of the reserve, or, I mean, how do we?
Yeah, I mean, it could, you know, it could start it, that's for sure. You know, because it's not always easy to put everything into the budget all at once.
Right.
So if you, you know, to me, if you have a reserve, you know, you could fund it for a couple of years out of the reserve and then gradually build up your budget so you can pay for it. That's what I would think, anyhow. Anything else from anyone? Yes, Mr. Waddle.
Another question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. The pending sale of our property down in South End, the recycling building, how are we dealing with that? Is that going to go into a reserve to fund the emergency services building, or are we just going to just let it fall to the fund balance and appropriate it from there?
I guess that would be a question for the treasurer. I think that's what it's intended for. I mean, that's what the proceed.
Talked about that, I don't, because I'm assuming, and I hate to assume, but I'm assuming that once the money gets here, the construction and stuff is gonna start pretty quickly. So I don't know that we really need to set up a reserve account for that money. If we can just move it into a certain code to just pay for the building.
You did say that.
Set up a capital project for us.
Okay.
Put that money into, but I don't know that we need to actually set a reserve up for that, because the money is gonna be spent, I'm assuming, pretty quickly.
Yeah, we have $45,000 right now in revenue that we've deposited towards that, and when we close on the sale, we'll get the remainder of the $450, set up a capital project, and we'll handle it all out of there.
Yes, Mr. McDermott.
Is the sale of the recycling center, is that in litigation? Or-
No.
No, because I read somewhere that the other gentleman he made a statement that he was talking to his attorney, so that we've received nothing tonight.
No, in fact, the company that purchased it, as well as the current tenant, have worked out an agreement as to when they're going to make the transition happen.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Frank, I think this is a wise decision. I think it's a good start. I think when we finally step out with the capital list, I think plumbing, unless I looked at like $18 million climbing. Keep in mind that when if the sales tax just slips 10% in 1 year, for example, that's a $2.5 million hole or more in your existing budget. But that also is revenue you don't have for the following year. It's called the doubling effect, and that's what happens. That there's a tendency to then want to go to your fund balance and try to mitigate some of that, and then you start drawing off the equity of your assets, and then your buildings begin to deteriorate. That whole process. So I think when we start budgeting a little bit each year in anticipation of these needs, I think that's just a very wise thing to do. And that's my complete support.
again, until the board authorizes expenditure of this money, it's actually still there. I mean, the board at any time could move to take this money and put it back in the fund balance if that's what they, if there was a downturn, because it is all contingent on the sales tax. As long as our sales tax continues to grow a little, each year, we're fine. But if that starts going the other way, then we got issues. But until the board appropriates the money and spends it, it's still there. I'm not sure if the budget committee can move this forward or as a resolution, or does this have to go to finance? Anybody know?
I would say if we're going to appropriate from the general fund now, we would pass it out of this committee and send it to finance.
I'll move that.
Okay, moved by Supervisor Dickinson, seconded by Supervisor Wild. Further discussion or questions? Yes, Ms. Bramer.
If we are moving this, I would ask that you put in another $100,000 for general fund balance to the capital project assessment. There's $20 million in our general fund. I think that's almost 20. I think $100,000 for planning purposes is appropriate when we have $200 million worth of projects that we're looking at.
It's up to the committee.
I'm good.
Good where we are right now.
Any other discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, there is another budget committee next Tuesday, budget committee meeting, and that will be on some of the particulars of the 2020 budget. Unless there's anything else, motion to adjourn. Whoop, Mr. Treasurer.
Just one quick thing is it just popped into my head, this may not be quite the appropriate place, but we did get notice finally, and I shared it with some people here, about the state taking sales tax from us to redistribute to the towns to make up for what they took away from the game, and we're gonna be losing about $224,000. They're taking the majority of it in December and then another shot in May.
Yeah, we got the same amount. Yeah, you got
That's kind of a nasty,
I-
nasty scenario.
Just for clarity, Mike, they're taking that from our county budget and they're giving it to the towns, our towns.
Yes.
So the money's still staying in the county.
You got that, right?
But there's a hole in our budget for $224,000.
We're paying ourselves.
Yeah, so that $224,000 would have been taken into the county budget. Half of it would have been distributed to the towns for what you're currently using your sales tax revenue for, and half of it would have stayed with the county. So the state is reaching into the town's pockets and taking your own money to pay yourselves your AIM payment, which they used to pay. And I've been talking to NISAC about the possibility of exploring litigation. The concept of this is wrong, that the state, rather than spend money out of their 4%, is coming into our 3%, which exists because of local authorization. It can't exist without local authorization, so we're going to investigate that, because if this stands, it's not going to be the first time.
That's my fear, that once they've done this, they're gonna start doing it again and again and again. And, that, to me, is a very dangerous precedent. And the other side of this is that I've been trying to do a lot of research, because Governor and everybody has said that this is going to be made up by internet sales.
Right.
And I do not believe that, not for 1 second. When you look at the major players in the market right now that people order from on the internet are already collecting sales tax. Walmart, Target, Sears, LL Bean, Cabela's, all of those places that most people order from are already collecting sales tax. And we're getting our share of that. So I don't see where, because now everybody has to collect sales tax for any New York State resident, is going to increase that much to offset what they're taking. So that's my research on that. And so I'm hoping that NISAC or somebody raises a legal challenge to this, because this is one of those things, once the spigot's open, it ain't gonna be shut off.
Send them a letter.
What's that?
Send them a letter.
Have we gone on record opposing it?
We have not.
I would make a motion that we go on record opposing the, taking the AIM money from the county portion of the sales tax.
I'll second that.
Resolution introduced by Supervisor Garrity to oppose the funding of the AIM payments to the towns, and seconded by Supervisor Dickinson. Any other discussion or questions?
Well, I think it'd be an opportune time for Mike to contact them.
And I'd also ask that, you know, if it gets approved, we send it along to, if we can't get it out in time for the next inter-county meeting, we ought to send it out to our inter-county cohorts and see if we can get some other counties to join in. NICEAG hasn't taken a stance. This doesn't seem, it seems like, if you read how the state passed the budget the way they did, by delaying payments, you know, Mike is right, we're gonna be in trouble.
Do you want this on for Friday? I can draft a resolution for Friday.
Well, it's up to the rest of the committee.
I'd like to see it
I'd like
Friday.
to see it
Yes.
done.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, anything else?
Move we adjourn.
Moved by Mr. Dickinson, seconded by Mr. McDevitt. All in favor, or adjourned?
Don't be mad, somebody.